The moment humanity was brought to its knees, the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. Across 1 million inhabited worlds, every public screen, orbital billboard, and holographic plaza synchronized into a single broadcast. Towering alien capitals paused their endless traffic. Mining colonies on frozen moons stopped drilling. Merchant convoys drifting through shimmering hyperspace lanes delayed their jumps. Even distant civilizations that had never spoken to a human tuned in, drawn by the promise of witnessing history. At the center of every screen stood the grand chamber of the Galactic Council, a cathedral of impossible scale carved from black crystal that reflected entire galaxies across its polished walls. Rings of floating platforms circled a blazing artificial star suspended high above the chamber, bathing thousands of delegates in cold white light. The atmosphere carried no excitement, only anticipation. It felt less like a diplomatic gathering and more like an execution. At the heart of the chamber stood the representatives of Earth. Their blue and white banner floated quietly behind them, its fabric barely moving in the chamber's perfectly controlled atmosphere. There were no weapons. No raised voices. Only silence. Ambassador Elias Mercer stood with his hands clasped behind his back, refusing to lower his eyes despite the thousands of alien faces staring down at him from every level of the colossal arena. He could hear whispers flowing through the crowd like a rising tide. Some voices mocked humanity openly. Others spoke with detached curiosity, as though observing an unusual animal moments before it disappeared forever. Mercer felt every word without understanding most of the languages. He didn't need translation. Contempt sounded the same in every corner of the universe. Then the High Chancellor rose. The ancient alien leader stepped onto the central dais with slow, deliberate confidence, his ceremonial robes shimmering like liquid metal beneath the artificial sun. His amplified voice echoed across the chamber with terrifying clarity. Today, he declared, we correct one of the greatest mistakes in galactic history. The chamber erupted into thunderous applause. Mercer remained perfectly still. The Chancellor extended a clawed hand toward the human delegation as if presenting criminals before a jury. For 100 standard cycles, humanity has claimed to value cooperation, diplomacy, and peace. Yet beneath those empty words lies a species driven by chaos, emotion, and primitive violence. More applause. Louder this time. Each clap echoed like another hammer striking steel. Above the chamber, enormous holographic displays ignited. Humanity's diplomatic crest dissolved into particles of light before billions of watching eyes. Earth's voting rights vanished from the Council registry. Every treaty symbol connected to Sol blinked red. Then, with almost theatrical cruelty, the Chancellor smiled. Let this serve as a lesson to every civilization. His voice slowed. Evolution does not reward compassion. A pulse of light swept across the chamber. The banner of Earth disintegrated into glowing ash. For a heartbeat, nobody spoke. Then laughter spread through the galleries. It began as scattered chuckles before swelling into a deafening roar. Entire delegations applauded while commentators across the galaxy celebrated the public disgrace of humanity. News drones drifted closer to capture every expression. Children on distant worlds watched in classrooms. Families gathered around holographic projectors. Merchants replayed the moment in crowded marketplaces. Humanity's humiliation became entertainment before the echoes had even faded. Yet millions of kilometers away, beneath Earth's blue skies and restless oceans, something entirely different was happening. No protests filled the streets. No emergency broadcasts interrupted civilian life. No politicians rushed before cameras to defend humanity's honor. Instead, the planet became quiet. Factories continued running. Military satellites shifted by fractions of a degree. Encrypted signals passed silently through ancient networks no alien civilization had ever detected. Inside command centers buried beneath mountains, forgotten lights flickered to life after decades of darkness. The people of Earth watched the broadcast in silence. Not because they were defeated, but because every man, woman, and child understood something the galaxy did not. The moment the laughter began, history had already changed. A century before the galaxy learned to fear humanity, Earth had chosen a different path. Instead of conquering the stars with overwhelming force, it reached outward with open hands. Generations of diplomats, engineers, scientists, and explorers transformed a once divided planet into the beating heart of interstellar cooperation. The solar system became more than humanity's home, it became the crossroads of civilizations. Gigantic orbital elevators stretched from Earth's equator into space like shimmering silver threads. Ring-shaped habitats rotated gracefully above the planet, their windows glowing against the darkness. Merchant vessels from hundreds of alien worlds drifted through Sol's trade corridors in elegant formations, their engines painting ribbons of blue, crimson, and emerald across the void. Every arrival carried new languages, unfamiliar cultures, impossible technologies, and the fragile promise that old enemies could one day become trusted allies. At the center of that dream stood Admiral Elena Ward. From the panoramic command deck of the orbital citadel Aegis Prime, she gazed through crystal-clear armor glass toward the curve of Earth below. The oceans shimmered beneath scattered clouds, while thousands of satellites moved in perfect harmony around the planet like silent guardians. Beyond them, the immense shipyards of Luna reflected the distant sun, where civilian freighters and exploration cruisers assembled side by side. It was difficult to imagine that only a few generations earlier, humanity had nearly destroyed itself through endless conflict. Now the same species that once fought over borders had become the diplomats everyone relied upon whenever tensions threatened to erupt between alien powers. Elena allowed herself the smallest smile. That had been the mission of her entire life. Not victory. Not domination. Balance. Every morning began with negotiations instead of battle reports. Her schedule overflowed with trade disputes, border disagreements, humanitarian missions, and peacekeeping operations across dozens of sectors. She knew the names of alien ambassadors better than she remembered most military officers. Some called her naive for believing diplomacy could outlast fear. Others considered her the strongest military commander alive precisely because she understood when not to use force. She wore both titles with quiet pride. Around her, the command center never rested. Officers monitored hyperspace lanes that stretched across dozens of star systems. Transparent holographic maps floated through the air, displaying thousands of civilian vessels crossing Sol's borders every hour. Artificial intelligences calmly announced arrivals from distant empires while translation systems converted hundreds of languages into flawless English. The atmosphere buzzed with controlled urgency, yet beneath it all lay an unmistakable confidence. Peace had become routine. Or at least it appeared that way. Because hidden beneath every diplomatic celebration was a silence few people questioned. Far beyond the public docks, beyond the glittering commercial stations, beyond the carefully mapped sectors known to the Galactic Council, massive construction projects continued in complete secrecy. Asteroids officially listed as abandoned mining sites vanished from navigation charts. Deep space cargo convoys altered their routes without explanation. Entire engineering divisions accepted assignments whose destinations were erased from every public record the moment they departed. Whenever curious officials asked where billions of credits were disappearing each year, the answers always sounded harmless: experimental propulsion research, infrastructure modernization, classified planetary defense upgrades. No one looked deeper. No one wanted to. Even Elena had signed countless authorization files she was never permitted to read beyond the first page. She trusted the system because she believed humanity had finally matured beyond preparing for another great war. As she watched children playing inside one of the rotating orbital habitats through long-range observation feeds, she wondered whether future generations would even understand what conflict truly felt like. That hope lingered in her mind for only a moment. A priority transmission blinked silently across her command console. No alarm. No warning siren. Just a single encrypted message carrying the highest security clearance in the history of Earth's government. She opened it. Her expression changed. Outside the station's vast observation window, peaceful traffic continued flowing through the stars exactly as before. But somewhere far beyond the edge of known space, the first shadow had already begun moving toward Earth. The broadcast ended, but its echoes refused to die. They spread across the galaxy faster than any fleet could travel, carried by quantum relay networks into every capital, colony, and frontier station. The humiliation of Earth became the headline of an entire civilization. Alien news anchors replayed the moment in slow motion, pausing on Ambassador Mercer's expression as the human banner dissolved into glowing dust. Commentators debated how long humanity would survive without the protection of the Galactic Council. Comedians mocked the idealists of Seoul, while financial markets celebrated the collapse of human influence. Across countless worlds, taverns erupted in laughter each time the Chancellor's words echoed through holographic projectors. To most of the galaxy, humanity's story was already over. On Earth, no one laughed. The streets of New Geneva remained strangely calm beneath a sky streaked with orbital traffic. Cafés stayed open. Children still walked to school. Freight trains thundered across continents exactly on schedule. To an outsider, it looked as though nothing had happened. Yet beneath that ordinary rhythm, something invisible had changed. Every citizen had seen the broadcast. Every family had heard the applause that followed humanity's disgrace. The silence wasn't born from fear. It was born from resolve. Admiral Elena Ward stood inside the Strategic Operations Center beneath the Himalayan Defense Complex, where sunlight had never reached. The chamber stretched hundreds of meters underground, carved directly into ancient bedrock and reinforced with alloys capable of surviving orbital bombardment. Thousands of holographic displays floated above circular command stations, painting the darkness with shifting blue light. Officers spoke in calm, measured voices, but Elena could hear something beneath their professionalism. Disappointment. Not because humanity had been defeated. Because they had been betrayed. One after another, encrypted reports flooded into the command network. The Helion Combine had suspended all trade with Earth. The Vask Dominion had revoked mutual defense agreements. 3 frontier colonies declared immediate neutrality. Civilian transport corridors through neighboring systems were sealed without warning. Human cargo vessels were denied docking rights at stations they had helped build decades earlier. Each notification appeared with the same cold red status. Agreement terminated. Elena watched the list grow longer. Dozens became hundreds. Hundreds became thousands. Entire generations of diplomacy unraveled in less than 6 hours. She remembered standing beside many of those leaders during peace conferences, celebrating treaties that had ended centuries-old wars between alien civilizations. Humanity had mediated conflicts that were never its own. It had rebuilt shattered worlds, delivered medical technology without demanding tribute, and defended trade routes that benefited every species equally. Now those same governments refused even to answer Earth's calls. The realization cut deeper than the Council's public humiliation. The applause had been painful. The silence afterward was worse. A young communications officer turned toward Elena, his face illuminated by flickering tactical displays. "Admiral." His voice hesitated. "They've disconnected every diplomatic channel." He didn't need to say anything else. Earth was alone. Far above the bunker, orbital traffic began to thin. Merchant convoys altered course away from the solar system. Massive freighters that had visited Earth for decades disappeared into hyperspace without transmitting farewell messages. Automated navigation beacons shut down one by one, their familiar lights vanishing from the darkness like stars being extinguished. It felt as though the galaxy itself was turning its back. Then another alert appeared. Unlike the others, it carried no sender. No timestamp. Only a symbol that almost no one alive recognized. A black horizon beneath a rising sun. The room fell completely silent. Veteran officers straightened instinctively. Several older commanders exchanged uneasy glances. Elena's pulse slowed instead of quickening. She had seen that emblem only once before, buried inside classified archives she had been ordered never to discuss. Last Dawn Protocol. A system older than the Galactic Alliance. Older than Earth's membership in the Council. Older even than most of humanity's interstellar colonies. One by one, sealed authorization keys activated across the planet. Vault doors buried beneath mountains unlocked with echoes that had not been heard in nearly a century. Deep beneath the Atlantic Ocean, forgotten reactors awakened. Hidden lunar installations powered on in absolute silence. Asteroid facilities erased from every public star chart illuminated their dormant assembly lines. No speeches were given. No emergency declarations were broadcast. No panic spread through the streets. Humanity didn't react with outrage. It reacted with preparation. And somewhere in the darkness beyond every known hyperspace route, ancient machines that had waited decades for a single command finally received it. The last dawn had begun. The Galactic Council believed it had already uncovered every secret Earth possessed. For decades, their intelligence agencies had monitored human fleets, counted every registered warship, mapped every military installation, and intercepted thousands of encrypted transmissions. They knew the locations of Earth's orbital defenses. They knew the production capacity of Luna's shipyards. They knew the size of every officially declared fleet. According to every calculation, humanity ranked somewhere in the middle of the galactic powers, capable of defending itself, perhaps, but never of challenging the ancient empires that had ruled the stars for millennia. Their confidence was absolute. Their data was flawless. Their conclusion was disastrously wrong. Miles beneath the granite peaks of the Andes, behind blast doors so enormous they disappeared into darkness, Admiral Elena Ward descended aboard a silent magnetic lift. The platform traveled deeper and deeper, passing layers of reinforced alloy that had remained sealed for nearly a century. There were no identifying signs. No military insignias. Only smooth black walls illuminated by thin strips of white light. The deeper she traveled, the colder the air became, until even the hum of machinery seemed swallowed by the immense silence surrounding her. She had spent an entire career protecting Earth, yet she had never known this place existed. The lift finally stopped. The doors opened. Elena stepped into a chamber so vast it felt less like an underground bunker and more like an entire hidden city. Towering fusion reactors pulsed with soft blue light beneath ceilings that disappeared into shadow. Endless rows of suspended assembly lines stretched beyond sight, where colossal starship hulls rested inside gravity cradles like sleeping giants. Thousands of engineers moved with calm precision across elevated platforms, while autonomous construction drones floated silently through the air, welding armor thicker than most planetary fortresses. Nothing looked abandoned. Nothing looked improvised. Everything looked ready. An elderly man approached her wearing a plain gray uniform with no rank insignia. "Welcome," he said quietly. His voice carried neither pride nor apology. "We've been expecting this day." Elena stared at him. "Who are you?" He smiled faintly. "The people who prepared for the meeting after diplomacy failed." Without another word, he activated a holographic display that rose between them. The image expanded into a three-dimensional map of the solar system. Then the map changed. Thousands of hidden markers appeared one after another. Deep space manufacturing stations concealed inside dark nebulae. Entire asteroid belts hollowed into automated ship factories. Research installations drifting beyond the Kuiper belt, invisible to conventional sensors. Lunar vaults housing technologies deliberately disguised for generations as abandoned experiments. The display kept growing. Thousands became tens of thousands. Every red marker represented a facility officially listed in galactic records as destroyed, decommissioned, or non-existent. None of them had ever stopped operating. The old engineer spoke softly, almost as if reciting history. Our ancestors never believed peace would last forever. Images flowed through the hologram, old recordings of Earth's earliest space pioneers debating humanity's future before first contact had ever occurred. They believed diplomacy should always come first. Another image appeared. Massive factories carving warship components from entire asteroids. But they also believed survival should never depend on another civilization's kindness. Elena felt the weight of every forgotten generation pressing against her. For 100 years, while ambassadors signed treaties beneath the bright lights of the Galactic Council, another civilization had quietly grown in the shadows. Millions of scientists, engineers, pilots, and soldiers had lived entire lives inside hidden facilities, their existence erased from every public record. Children had been born underground, educated in secrecy, and dedicated to a single purpose. Not conquest. Preparation. The final hologram emerged. An immense fleet. Not dozens of ships. Not hundreds. Thousands. No. Hundreds of thousands. Battleships, carriers, logistics vessels, drone swarms, planetary defense platforms, an armada so vast it encircled the holographic solar system like a second asteroid belt. Each vessel waited in complete silence. Fueled. Armed. Crewed. Ready. The engineer looked toward Elena. We never wanted to use them. She couldn't answer. Because she finally understood. The treaties humanity had signed. The compromises it had accepted. Even the humiliation endured before the Galactic Council. None of it had been born from weakness. It had been purchased with time. And while the galaxy celebrated Earth's submission, humanity had spent a century quietly preparing for the day it would no longer need anyone's permission to stand among the stars. The first light of dawn had not yet reached Earth's horizon when the global assembly plaza filled with people. Millions stood shoulder to shoulder beneath the pale glow of orbital mirrors, their faces illuminated by the last stars of the night. There were no chants, no angry speeches, no desperate pleas for revenge. An almost sacred silence settled over the crowd, broken only by the soft whisper of the wind moving through rows of weathered memorial flags. At the center of the plaza stood a massive circular furnace forged from polished black alloy, its interior glowing with an intense white heat. Around it rested the documents that had shaped a century of peace, every treaty, alliance, trade accord, and diplomatic charter humanity had signed since joining the Galactic Council. They were more than pieces of paper. They represented decades of hope, sacrifice, compromise, and trust. One by one, world leaders stepped forward. Without hesitation, they placed the agreements into the flames. Ink curled into ash. Ancient signatures disappeared in brilliant sparks. By the time the first ray of sunlight touched the edge of the sky, every promise the galaxy had broken had become smoke rising above Earth. At that exact moment, the universe changed. Across thousands of star systems, empty regions of space shimmered with faint distortions. To ordinary sensors, they looked like harmless fluctuations in gravity. Then the distortions split open. Enormous warships emerged from cloaked hyperspace corridors with breathtaking precision, their matte black hulls absorbing the light of nearby stars. Entire armadas materialized in disciplined silence around strategic jump gates, orbital defense rings, and major military shipyards belonging to the Galactic Council. They fired no weapons. They issued no threats. Yet every commander who witnessed their arrival understood the impossible truth. Humanity had deployed a fleet larger than anything recorded in galactic history, and it had done so without a single intelligence agency detecting the preparations. Inside the command bridge of the flagship Resolute, Admiral Elena Ward watched holographic battle maps bloom across the air before her. Thousands of blue symbols spread outward in perfect synchronization, each representing a hidden fleet reaching its assigned position to the exact second. Artificial intelligences calmly confirmed objectives. Hyperspace Gate Sigma secured. Communications Nexus 12 isolated. Enemy sensor arrays disabled. Orbital defense grids contained. Every report arrived without mention of civilian casualties. That had never been the objective. Humanity wasn't seeking destruction. It was demonstrating control. Meanwhile, elite cyber warfare divisions buried deep beneath Earth's surface unleashed algorithms developed in complete secrecy over generations. Invisible waves of quantum code surged through the galactic relay network, slipping past encryption systems that had been considered unbreakable for centuries. Military command channels dissolved into static. Autonomous defense satellites refused hostile commands. Fleet logistics collapsed as navigation systems quietly redirected supply convoys away from battle zones. Entire military alliances found themselves blind, deaf, and unable to coordinate before a single shot had been fired. Panic spread faster than any weapon. Council admirals shouted contradictory orders. Governors demanded status reports that never arrived. Ancient empires, once so confident in their superiority, stared in disbelief as their overwhelming numerical advantages became meaningless in the face of flawless preparation. Then every command screen in the galaxy flickered. The image of Admiral Elena Ward appeared simultaneously across military headquarters, government chambers, and orbital flagships. Behind her stretched the silent bridge of the Resolute, where officers stood calmly at their stations without celebration or hatred in their eyes. She spoke only once. Her voice remained steady. "You mistook restraint for dependence." A pause. "You mistook diplomacy for fear." Silence filled every listening room. Then her final words echoed across the stars. "Today, both illusions end." The transmission disappeared. Still, no bombardment came. No cities burned. No worlds were shattered. Instead, humanity systematically dismantled every offensive capability capable of threatening civilian populations. Orbital cannons powered down under remote control. Fleet reactors entered safe shutdown protocols. Missile stockpiles became inert through cyber intrusion. Within hours, the greatest military coalition in galactic history had been rendered powerless, not through annihilation, but through unmatched precision, discipline, and overwhelming strategic brilliance. For the first time since the stars had been united beneath the Galactic Council, the galaxy understood what true power looked like. It wasn't measured by how much destruction one could unleash. It was measured by having the strength to end a war. Before it ever truly began. The silence that followed humanity's victory echoed farther than any explosion ever could. Across the galaxy, fleets that had once sailed with absolute confidence drifted motionless in the darkness, their weapons offline, their command network silent, their admirals left staring through observation windows at the impossible reality before them. Not a single planet had been reduced to ash. No civilian colonies had been targeted. No vengeance had been unleashed against the innocent. Humanity had possessed the power to devastate entire civilizations, yet it had chosen restraint once again. This time, however, restraint was no longer mistaken for weakness. It had become the most terrifying display of strength the galaxy had ever witnessed. Days later, the same grand chamber of the Galactic Council that had erupted in laughter stood wrapped in complete silence. The enormous crystal walls still reflected distant galaxies, but the atmosphere had changed beyond recognition. The towering platforms that once overlooked humanity with smug superiority now seemed smaller somehow, humbled beneath the weight of recent history. Alien delegates entered without ceremony, their footsteps echoing across polished black floors where applause had once thundered. No one spoke above a whisper. Every ambassador carried the memory of hidden fleets appearing from nowhere, of military empires collapsing without a battle, of realizing that the species they had publicly mocked had been capable of ending them all, and simply chose not to. At the center of the chamber, beneath the artificial star that illuminated every diplomatic session, stood a single transparent crystal monument. Inside it rested a handful of gray ash. Nothing more. No priceless artifact. No legendary weapon. Only the remains of the final treaty burned on Earth during the last dawn. A simple inscription floated above the display in dozens of galactic languages. Trust cannot survive where respect has already died. Visitors stopped before it in silence. Some lowered their heads. Others simply stared, unable to look away. That tiny collection of ash carried more weight than every fleet surrounding the council capital. Admiral Elena Ward stood quietly near the observation balcony overlooking the chamber. She no longer wore ceremonial medals or elaborate military dress. Her uniform was plain, almost understated, as if she wished to remind everyone that history had not been changed by symbols, but by choices. She watched as delegation after delegation approached Earth's representatives, not to deliver demands, but to request negotiations under entirely new conditions. There were no ultimatums this time. No lectures about humanity's place in the universe. Every proposal began with the same word. Respect. For a long moment, Elena looked beyond the chamber's transparent walls toward the endless sea of stars. They hadn't won because they possessed the largest fleet. They hadn't prevailed because their technology surpassed everyone else's. They had endured because, even after humiliation, betrayal, and overwhelming provocation, they refused to surrender the principles that defined them. Power had protected humanity. Character had preserved it. Far away, on worlds that had never seen Earth with their own eyes, children gathered inside classrooms to study the events now known simply as the Dawn Accord. Teachers replayed the infamous council broadcast beside the recordings of humanity's response. Young minds watched the laughter fade into stunned silence. They learned how arrogance had blinded powerful empires, how patience had hidden unimaginable strength, and how true leadership required more than superior weapons. Some children asked why humanity had not destroyed its enemies when victory was certain. The answer never changed. Because they wanted a future. Generations passed. The burned treaties remained untouched inside their crystal monument. Not as trophies. Not as warnings. But as reminders that peace built on humiliation is only another form of conflict waiting for its moment. And whenever new diplomats entered the council hall for the first time, their eyes inevitably settled upon that quiet handful of ash before they looked toward Earth's flag. In that single moment, they understood a lesson written not in ink, nor carved into stone, but earned through courage. The galaxy had publicly humiliated Earth. By dawn, every agreement had been burned. But from those ashes, humanity did not rise as a conqueror. It rose as the civilization that taught the stars the true meaning of strength.